All right, on this episode of Bouts Talking Bouts, we're posted up the Leon Centre in Kingston, Ontario. Chinlock Wrestling and House of Hardcore collaborating for quite an interesting benefit show. And I'm talking to a very interesting individual. I'm talking to Spenny of Kenny vs. Spenny fame, Spencer Nolan Rice. How's it going, man?
It's going well. I'm in wrestling heaven right now, so I'm very happy. It's my happy place.
I'm kind of curious, like, where does your fandom date back to? Presumably you're a lifelong wrestling fan from what I can tell.
I'm 56 years old. When I was from 7 years old on, I used to go to Maple Leaf Gardens where they had wrestling cards basically every Sunday, Frank Tunney cards.
Angelo King Kong Mosca and all those guys?
Actually predated that. I mean, maybe he was wrestling in Hamilton. It was the Sheik, the original Sheik. That was he, to this day, is, I think, the greatest heel that ever lived. And one of my favorites. I'm buddies with Sabu a little bit on Twitter. And, you know, and then it wasn't gory enough. And my cousin used to take me, I was 7. So we'd go to Buffalo Memorial Auditorium, and then we'd see The Butcher, Tex McKenzie, I mean, on and on and on, the Fabulous Kangaroos. And I've been a fan my whole life, you know, but I do love the old school.
And I'm curious how you maintain the vigor, too, because sometimes you hear from those older pro wrestling fans, like, I don't care for the modern product so much. Maybe it's like a spot monkey kind of thing. How do you kind of like go through the different permutations and appreciate each iteration of pro wrestling?
Because at the end of the day, it's fundamentally the same thing. And it's show business, you know. I know there's the athletic part of it. That part of it does not get me. What gets me is the entertainment, the spectacle of it. Of course, Vince McMahon is the master of creating the big spectacles with WrestleMania, etc. You know, you get older, you get married, you have kids, you have less time. If I had the WWE Network, my wife would divorce me. So you just have to kind of go with whatever you can. And being a part in these live shows, I've done a House of Hardcore in Toronto. I've done 4 of these Chinlock shows. It's just a lot of fun. And for a guy like me, who's essentially a jabroni, just a big fan, you know, being backstage, watching the wrestlers, how they organize the matches, it's a real thrill, and I love it.
And how did that initial involvement come about? You talked about being on a few Chinlock shows. When did the initial conversations get going to have you as part of the series?
What happened was, when I moved to Kingston, I live here. So Jan Murphy was a big Kenny versus Spenny fan, and we met at a bar for an interview. And I don't even know if we did the interview because we talked wrestling. He didn't know I was a wrestling fan. I just had met him, so I obviously didn't know.
That's the best, like, serendipitous thing, though, isn't it? When you find out someone's a wrestling fan and, like, how deep they go with it.
Yeah, and Jan's just amazing, and he's made me a part of this, and it's for charity. It's just a win-win for me, you know?
And has there been, like, any cool stuff you've got to do, like any, like, bucket list kind of things? Like, you got to go and hit someone in the back with a chair type thing, like, any moment where you're like, oh, wow, this, like, it...
Well, I mean, bucket list stuff. I met Andre the Giant at a Chinese restaurant in Toronto. I must have been 10 years old.
That's awesome.
That was really cool. And all the wrestlers used to, after the show, they'd go from Maple Leaf Gardens to this place. It's no longer there, called Sai Wu. It was a second-story Chinese restaurant. So that's where I met him. I was suplexed by Tyson Ducks, who I'm going to be in a match with as a manager, managing the Dreamer and Billy Gunn tonight. And I've had so many great wrestling experiences. Maybe my all-time favorite was, one of my favorite faces of all time was a guy named Bobo Brazil. And I went to a show in Keswick, Ontario. I was just a kid. And Bobo was there, and I got a signed picture with him. And, you know, I was tiny at that point in my life, and he was this enormous guy. And I remember the Love Brothers, if you remember them, Hartford and Reginald. They had a hippie gimmick.
That's a deep cut.
Yeah, deep. And I wanted their autograph, and I had Bobo's 8x10, and I asked them to sign it, and it's kayfabe days, and they get away from me with that guy. And that was thrilling in retrospect, and at the time, actually. But you know what? I got a deep, deep love and respect for the business, and I will always, till the day I drop dead, be a wrestling fan.
And so what's it like being around some of these, like, legendary wrestlers, like, you know, Tugboat, and you got Jimmy Hart over there, Bret Hart was here earlier. What's that like?
I just got here. You know, it's one of those things where at the end of the day, I'm a fan. Most of them don't know who I am. So I'm just like everybody else. I just sort of, if there's an opportunity arises where I can meet them, and not, you know, I don't want to seem like a fan, but I am. You know, who did I meet so far? Through Jan, I hung out with Ricky Steamboat. I met, what's his name? He's not in the WWE. He was the big bodybuilder guy, bald. This was at a house show here. You know, Jimmy Jimmy the ref. It's not really about meeting people. It's just about being a part of the show, and there's a camaraderie. It's the same with blues music, which is my other love of life. There's with the players. There's just a camaraderie that I can be a part of, even from the outlying position, is just a lot of fun for me.
You mentioned most don't know who you are, though. Are there a few young wrestlers on the come up, though, who are like Kenny versus Spenny fans? They're like, oh, how's it going, Spenny? What's up?
I don't know if they know me or not. Kenny's the kind of guy that walks up and goes, hey, I'm Kenny. I had a hit TV show. I'm not that kind of guy, so I never really know.
No, but no one ever approached you and was like, oh, hey, Spenny, what's up?
Wrestlers? Young guys, yeah, but I don't know who they are.
Oh yeah.
Right. Yeah. Again, none of the current roster. You just don't know, because they could be watching it on YouTube. I would think the Canadian wrestlers. I'm curious to know if Bret Hart has ever heard of our show. I don't know, but it's just I don't really care. It's just being a part of it and just being a fly on the wall in the dressing room. I remember once when I did Tommy's show in Toronto. I went into the dressing room. I sat down. And Bubba Dudley, I guess I sat in his seat, which is some kind of encroachment issue that I wasn't aware of. And
not the proper locker room etiquette.
Right, and he grabbed me by my he was nice about it, don't get me wrong, but in no uncertain terms, lifted me out of his seat and moved me over to across the dressing room. But I treasure those moments,
Oh, absolutely. And I guess one of the last questions I have, do you think there's any money in a street fight blow-off match with Kenny, or do you not see him getting in the ring at any point?
The problem was we did the wrestling episode on Kenny versus Spenny, and he didn't do any of the wrestling, but became a monster gimmick called Yarp Yarp.
To make a standard trope of the show, he just would never really follow along with what you're supposed to do.
Right. I did my training. Tyson suplexed me, not in the match, but in the training, and it was televised. So I'm always asking Kenny. I wanted him to come out to this. He says he'll come out to the next one, but he's really hard to get to commit to something like that. I mean, if I remember, he was in underwear and it was hiked up right below his nipples, and he had the helmet, which Sebastian, our cameraman, had, the basketball that was turned into the Yarp Yarp helmet with the teeth in it. That apparently doesn't exist anymore. But I'd like to say this: is that tonight is really special for me because I'm not wrestling. I'm managing. And it's funny because I've cut a few promos and put them on my social media, and I'm affecting the kind of old school manager voice, and I'm really channeling Eddie the Brain Creechman and Abdullah Farouk or Ernie Roth, which unless you're a real wrestling geek or of a certain vintage, you're not going to know who the hell that is. But everybody thinks it's Gilbert Gottfried. And it's very hard to do that voice, and with whatever Jewish inflection I have in my DNA, it does sound like Gilbert Gottfried. So I did, my last promo was, I don't know who this Gilbert is. Tell me I sound like Gilbert. But,
so maybe a blow-off match with Gilbert more than with Kenny, I guess.
That would be amazing. But I've got my old school manager sweater that Creechman used to wear. And I've got glitter lettering on the back. I wrote "#1 manager," on the back of my sweater.
What's your prop? Do you have a prop to go along with it?
Well, I've got the duck call, right? Because I don't know if you've been following my history with Tyson Ducks. Has been, I call him Quack Quack Duck, because it's actually Tyson Dukes.
Yeah.
But he spelt it D-U-X, which is ducks. So that's what I call him, a duck. And I have this is interesting because I have my own idea how I want my participation in the match to go. But far be it for me to tell Tommy Dreamer or Billy Gunn or Tyson or any of these guys what I want to do. Tyson's pretty cool because he was on Kenny vs. Spenny. He knows that I'm a comedian, and I love the comedy in wrestling. By the way, that to me was the high watermark. Even the Sheik was funny. He was as terrifying as he was. There was something very funny about it, especially in the old days when he used to abuse his wife Joyce in the ring, which is just such a great heel move. But so I'm just, that's just a fantasy come true in a live event, to be this manager and do that. What I want to pitch them is that I come in, I'm so obnoxious that even my guys, Dreamer and Gunn, turn on me, and all four of them kick the shit out of me before the match, and then they carry me out, and I'm just going quack 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 quack. But
bite on that idea.
I'm nervous. I haven't pitched it yet.
Oh, okay.
And again, I'm hesitant to because these guys are the real deal, and I'm a jabroni. So we'll see what happens. If they ask me, I'll tell them what I think. But they may have a better idea. Who knows?
Well, that sounds like a great spot, and you've been great with your time. I'm curious, though, if you want to add any kind of parting thought as we're wrapping up here, man.
Well, just, what I like to say is a lot of my sophisticated friends, they still can't believe that I've been a lifelong wrestling fan, to which I always say to them, and I go, why? They go, because it's fake. I go, do you like movies? And they go, of course. I go, well, don't you think they're fake? And they become tongue-tied. They don't know what to say. And if you don't get it, it's like blues music to me. You either have it in your blood or you don't. And I do.
Yeah, no, appreciate the time, man. As a Canadian millennial, it's definitely fun getting to interview someone from that show, Kenny vs. Spenny and everything like that. That was definitely a show on the come up. So, yeah, thanks for the time and best luck with the show, man.
My pleasure.